Demanding justice for a local woman shot and killed inside her Warrensville Heights home.
Amanda Williams, she was killed nearly 2 weeks ago, and now friends, family, and community members are demanding justice, calling the Justice Center here to try to get answers and call on prosecutor.
Warrensville Heights man faced the jury today for the murder of his fiancée. Tyrell Edwards is accused of killing 46-year-old Amanda Williams at their home back in October.
A single gunshot wound would have paralyzed Amanda Williams from the neck down. According to the medical examiner who testified at trial, that means she could not have been holding a knife at the moment she was shot. That one detail is the reason this case did not end the way it started, and it's the detail we're going to build toward across this entire episode. This case involves domestic violence and gun violence. If you want cases broken down this way, using verified court records and reporting, rather than assumptions, subscribe now and tell us where you're watching from. It helps us know how far these stories are reaching. Let's start with who Amanda Williams was, because before any of this, she was known for something entirely different than how her name is remembered today. Amanda Williams was 46 years old and lived in the Cleveland area her entire adult life. She built a career as a hairstylist over nearly 3 decades, eventually opening her own salon in University Heights, Ohio. She specialized in bridal and event styling, working with clients preparing for weddings and other major life moments. Alongside her salon work, she developed her own line of hair care products and built a following online under her professional name. Clients who worked with her described a business built on repeat relationships, not one-off appointments. She was also an active member of a nationally recognized sorority and was known in her community for her involvement beyond just her business. At home, Amanda was the center of a close family. Her daughter, Tyler Williams, lived with her. Her son, Tristan Bentley, was working toward his own future, with plans to enroll in the United States Air Force Academy. She also had a young grandson. Her mother, Jewel Lewis, and her brother, Joey Lewis, were both a consistent part of her daily life. Amanda's business wasn't a small side project. Building a client base large enough to open a standalone salon on top of a personal product line typically takes years of consistent word-of-mouth trust. In the beauty industry, that kind of loyalty usually points to more than just technical skill. It points to a personality people wanted to be around. Multiple accounts from people who knew her describe someone who made an impression the moment she walked into a room, which is part of why her death didn't stay a private family matter for very long. It became a community matter almost immediately. Around 2017, Amanda began a relationship with a man named Tyrell Edwards. Edwards was employed at a local hospital and also worked as a rideshare driver. In 2019, he moved into Amanda's home. In 2022, the two became engaged. On the surface, and on social media, their relationship looked like any long-term partnership approaching marriage. But court records paint a different picture underneath that surface. In 2019, Edwards was reportedly arrested in connection with an alleged act of violence against Amanda. In 2020, a separate woman filed a restraining order against him, citing stalking and threats. Later that same year, Amanda was hospitalized. According to her family, she gave people an unrelated explanation for her injuries at the time. 2 days after that hospitalization, she sent Edwards a text message. In it, she described feeling like a battered woman. Edwards responded to that message with an apology, acknowledging what he had done. That exchange would stay buried in old messages for roughly 3 years, until it resurfaced as part of the official trial record. Despite this history, the relationship continued. The couple attended couples counseling together. The engagement moved forward. Whatever conversations took place between the two of them privately after that 2020 text message are something only Amanda and Edwards ever fully knew. That history sat quietly until October of 2023, when it collided directly with a single argument that would not end the way any of the ones before it had. On October 8th, Amanda traveled to Columbus for a professional hair show, an ordinary work trip she had taken many times before. The next morning, an exchange of text messages with Edwards turned into an argument. At some point during that exchange, Amanda contacted her phone carrier and had Edwards removed from her plan, cutting off that line of communication. Edwards responded by going to a phone store, getting a new number, and returning to the home they shared. Later that day, Amanda came back from her trip, and the argument picked back up in person. At some point during the evening, Edwards took 2 firearms from the bedroom and carried them out to his car before returning inside. The disagreement continued. According to the evidence presented at trial, Amanda came upstairs holding a kitchen knife. What happened in the minutes that followed is where the two sides of this case diverged sharply. According to Edwards, Amanda confronted him with the knife, and he retrieved one of the firearms and fired because he believed he had no other option. Prosecutors argued a different sequence entirely, that removing both firearms from the room and placing them in his car before any physical confrontation involving the knife occurred was not a defensive action. It was preparation. Cell phone video recorded during parts of the confrontation that night became a central piece of evidence in the case, and it would later be reviewed and stabilized by a forensic video expert for presentation to the jury. This is a good moment to pause on why that footage mattered so much. In cases where the only surviving account comes from the person who caused the death, investigators are left trying to reconstruct events almost entirely from physical evidence. A recording, even a partial or unclear one, gives them something a testimony alone cannot: a time-stamped, unedited reference point. It's part of why this case eventually turned on forensic detail rather than competing verbal accounts. 6 shots were fired that night. According to the official investigative findings released by the Cuyahoga County Prosecutor's Office, those 6 shots caused 8 separate wounds to Amanda's body. 2 of those wounds to her neck and back were fatal. One of the wounds was significant enough that it would have caused immediate paralysis from the neck down, which prosecutors would later use to directly challenge Edwards' version of events. Amanda's daughter Tyler was in the home at the time and heard the situation unfold from another part of the house. She went toward the sound. According to the investigation, Edwards did not attempt to render aid to Amanda afterward, and he kept her daughter from doing so as well. At approximately 11:41 p.m. on October 9, 2023, Edwards called 911 and told the dispatcher he had just killed his fiancée. Warrensville Heights Police and EMS responded to the home on Sunset Drive. When officers arrived, Edwards directed them inside and told them where Amanda could be found. She was transported to Cleveland Clinic South Point Hospital, where she was pronounced dead. Officers Selena Cohen and Christopher Jordan were among the first responders on scene. Officer John Veck later took Edwards into custody for questioning. Edwards' account to investigators was consistent with what he would later testify to in court, that Amanda had confronted him with the knife, and that he had fired because he believed his life was in danger. If you're finding this level of detail useful, this is a good point to subscribe if you haven't already, because the second half of this case is where the investigation actually turns, and you won't want to miss how the evidence unravels his account piece by piece. Here's where the legal process becomes important to understand, because it explains why Edwards was not immediately charged. Under Ohio law, once a defendant raises a claim of self-defense, the burden shifts to prosecutors. They are required to prove, beyond a reasonable doubt, that the shooting was not legally justified. At that early stage, with the video evidence not yet reviewed and no independent witness to the moment of the shooting itself, investigators determined they did not yet have enough to file charges. Police held Edwards for 48 hours, the maximum legal window allowed without formal charges, and then released him. The reasoning given at the time was insufficient evidence. This is one of the more difficult realities of cases like this one. The law is not designed to weigh who the public believes is more credible. It's designed around what can be proven with evidence within a specific legal standard. In the immediate aftermath of a shooting, before video has been analyzed and before autopsy results are finalized, that standard can be genuinely difficult to meet, even in cases where the surrounding history suggests a different picture. That gap between what a family knows in their gut and what a prosecutor can prove in a courtroom is exactly where this case sat for its first 3 weeks. Amanda's family did not treat that outcome as final. Within days, her mother, Jewel Lewis, and her daughter, Tyler Williams, began speaking publicly, pushing for the investigation to be reopened and for charges to be filed. Pastor Rob Vernon of the Word Church, who knew Amanda through the community, also spoke out on the family's behalf. The family retained attorney Ian Friedman, who began compiling additional evidence the initial investigation had not yet incorporated, including prior text messages, photographs, and hospital records connected to Amanda's earlier injuries. Word continued to spread through Amanda's professional and personal community. Her sorority connections, her longtime clients, and friends who had known her for years became part of a growing public effort to keep the case active rather than let it close quietly. Amanda was laid to rest on October 19th, in a funeral held at the Word Church, before the case had even reached a grand jury. On November 1, 2023, a Cuyahoga County grand jury indicted Terrell Edwards on charges connected to Amanda's death. An arrest warrant was issued the same day. Edwards later turned himself in to authorities. He appeared before Cuyahoga County Common Pleas Judge Stephen Gall for arraignment, where he entered a plea of not guilty. The court set bond, ordered GPS monitoring as a condition of release, and issued a no-contact order barring any communication with Amanda's family. Attorney Ian Friedman argued for a higher bond amount, citing specific safety concerns. A later defense motion to reduce that bond was denied. The trial began on February 26, 2024, in front of Judge Gall at the Cuyahoga County Court of Common Pleas, and ran across 4 days. On the first day, prosecutors began building their case through witness testimony. Tyler Williams testified about what she experienced the night her mother was killed. Officers Cohen and Jordan described what they found upon arriving at the home. Officer Vec detailed his interview with Edwards immediately following the shooting. On the second day, the case moved into forensic territory. The Cuyahoga County Medical Examiner's Office took the stand, with Dr. Elizabeth Mooney presenting the autopsy findings. Her testimony established the number and location of Amanda's wounds and, critically, addressed Amanda's physical position relative to Edwards at the moment she was shot. According to her findings, the physical evidence placed Amanda several feet away from Edwards, not in the close-range struggle his account described. On the third day, jurors were shown video evidence, including footage from Edwards' interrogation, and the cell phone video recorded the night of the shooting. Forensic video expert Thomas Sula had worked to enhance and stabilize that footage so it could be reviewed clearly. Additional forensic testimony came from DNA expert Lisa Moore, ballistics expert Kristen Cuth, and trace evidence expert Curtis Jones, each contributing findings that supported the prosecution's timeline. Lead investigator Lieutenant Paris Johnson tied the physical evidence back to the broader case for the jury. At the center of all of this forensic testimony was one unresolved detail. The knife recovered from beneath Amanda's body had no visible blood on it, while a lighter found in her other hand did. Prosecutors argued that this contradiction meant the knife had not ended up in that position naturally during a struggle. It had been placed there afterward. Each forensic specialty added a different layer to that argument. The DNA testimony addressed whose contact could be confirmed on which objects at the scene. The ballistics testimony addressed the trajectory and distance of the shots, which is part of what supported the medical examiner's conclusion that Amanda was not in close range when she was struck. The trace evidence testimony covered smaller physical details recovered from the scene that corroborated the sequence prosecutors were presenting. None of these specialties on their own would have been enough to build a conviction. Combined, they replaced a single disputed verbal account with a body of independently verifiable evidence, which is ultimately what shifted the case from unresolved to prosecutable. On the fourth and final day, Edwards took the stand in his own defense. He testified that Amanda had initially told him to leave the house, then changed her mind. He described removing both firearms from the bedroom and placing them in his car before, in his account, hearing Amanda on the phone and deciding to leave. He testified that he then heard her retrieve a knife and confront him, and that he fired because he had no other choice. On cross-examination, prosecutors returned to the 2020 text message in which Amanda described feeling like a battered woman. Edwards acknowledged the exchange and admitted, under questioning, that he remembered apologizing for an earlier incident involving her. Prosecutors then returned to the sequence of the guns, arguing directly that removing both firearms from the room before any knife was involved contradicted a genuine claim of self-defense. On March 4, 2024, the jury reached its verdict. Edwards was acquitted of aggravated murder. He was found guilty on 2 counts of murder, 2 counts of felonious assault, and 1 count of domestic violence, along with related firearm specifications tied to those charges. Cuyahoga County Prosecutor Michael O'Malley said following the verdict that the evidence presented had conclusively shown Amanda Williams' death was an intentional homicide without legal justification, and that the jury's decision represented a vital step toward justice for her and her family. 1 week later, on March 11th, the court reconvened for sentencing. Dozens of Amanda's supporters filled the courtroom, and many had written letters to the judge ahead of the hearing. Amanda's children addressed the court directly. Her daughter, Tyler Williams, spoke about her own daughter growing up without ever knowing her grandmother. Her son, Tristan Bentley, was unable to attend in person, and his statement was read aloud by the family's attorney. Her brother, Joey Lewis, also addressed the court, later telling reporters that the family felt they had received what they could and were ready to begin healing. For sentencing purposes, the 5 counts on which Edwards was convicted were merged, with the punishment centered on the murder count. Judge Stephen Gall sentenced Edwards to life in prison, with parole eligibility after 24 years. That sentence combined eligibility after 15 years on the murder conviction with an additional 9 years tied to the firearm specifications. Outside the courtroom, one of the prosecutors on the case reflected on the level of community support the family had received throughout the process, noting how visibly present Amanda's supporters had been at every stage of the proceedings. That kind of sustained public presence, from the initial press conferences to the final sentencing hearing, is part of what distinguishes this case from ones that quietly fade after an initial release. Community pressure didn't change the evidence, but it kept public attention on a case that could otherwise have stalled after the first 48 hours. The case did not end at sentencing. Edwards filed an appeal, raising 10 separate legal arguments against his conviction. Those arguments included claims that his defense attorney had been ineffective, that prosecutors had overstepped during the trial, that the jury instructions were flawed, and that the verdict form should have included a separate space for jurors to weigh his self-defense claim independently. He also challenged whether the evidence supported the verdict at all, and separately challenged how the firearm specifications had been applied to his sentence. On February 27, 2025, more than a year after his original sentencing, the 8th District Court of Appeals ruled unanimously. All 3 judges rejected every one of Edwards' 10 arguments. His conviction and sentence were affirmed in full. Prosecutor Michael O'Malley responded to that ruling by stating that Edwards had purposefully murdered Amanda Williams and attempted to use a false self-defense claim to cover up what he had done, and that the appellate court's decision confirmed that conclusion. It's worth understanding why an appeal like this one so rarely succeeds once a conviction has been affirmed at trial with this much forensic support behind it. Appellate courts are not reweighing evidence the way a jury does. They're reviewing whether the trial itself was conducted fairly, whether the law was applied correctly, and whether the evidence, taken as a whole, could reasonably support the verdict a jury actually reached. When a conviction rests on multiple independent forensic findings rather than a single disputed detail, as this one did, that combination becomes very difficult to unwind on appeal, even across 10 separate arguments. As of the most recent available records, that ruling stands, and no further appeal has been reported as pending. If you've followed this case through to this point, it's worth sitting with what actually separated the outcome from where this case started. In the first 48 hours, Terrell Edwards walked out of a police station a free man because the physical evidence available at that moment appeared to support his account. It was only once investigators had time to fully process the forensic details, the crime scene photographs, the cell phone video, and the autopsy findings that a different picture began to take shape. A knife that should have carried some trace of a struggle and didn't. A lighter that did show that trace. A wound pattern that placed Amanda several feet away from Edwards rather than in close combat. And a wound severe enough that it would have made it physically impossible for her to keep holding anything at all. Individually, each of those details could be explained away. Together, they told investigators, and eventually a jury, a story that didn't match the one Edwards gave in the first hours after the shooting. This case is also a reminder of how self-defense claims are handled under the law in states like Ohio. The burden placed on prosecutors to disprove a self-defense claim beyond a reasonable doubt is a significant one, and it's part of why cases like this can end in release before they end in conviction. It took a grand jury, a 4-day trial, and eventually a full appellate review before the legal process caught up with the physical evidence. For Amanda Williams' family, this case will always carry a weight no verdict fully resolves, a milestone she won't be present for, a grandchild who will only know her through photographs and stories. But for the legal record, the case is now closed. The conviction stands, the sentence stands, and the appeal that challenged all of it was rejected in full. If you want more cases like this one, broken down carefully and accurately, using verified court records rather than speculation, subscribe to the channel and follow for the next episode. And as always, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. It genuinely helps us understand how far these stories are reaching, and we read every comment.
Attorney.
The fact that I have to live the rest of my life without my mom. My daughter has to live the rest of her life without her grandma because a coward wanted to take her life. My mom did not deserve this at all. My mother was a family-oriented person. She was my motivator, my best friend. She was the glue to this family. She was my guidance, my everything. I just can't live without her, and I can't imagine just living life without my mom. I can't never call my mom again and tell her I love her. I can't never call and tell her about my day, about how my daughter is doing, how she's growing up. I can't do that no more. He can do that. He can still call his mom. He can still call and check on her. They can all call and check and see how he's doing in jail. We can't get my mom back, ever. My daughter has to grow up without a grandma. She can't even, she won't see her start kindergarten. She won't see her turn 5, grow up, be a teenager. She won't see any of that. I'm about to be 30 years old, but I won't even be here to see that milestone. She won't be able to see my brother graduate college or anything like that. I can't believe she's not here no more. How can I ever explain to my daughter that my mother is never coming back? That's the one that she called her Papa, the only one that she knew, the only person that she was around for 4 years. How can I even explain that to her? And you said you never wanted me to be traumatized. I was traumatized the moment I walked in the room and see my mom lying there. And I was even more traumatized. I couldn't even hold her with her last breath. I just can't. It's not sitting right with me. I don't feel like anyone should be out here in this world if they kill someone. I don't respect a person like that, and I don't have any sympathy. This man never had any remorse for my mom at all. He didn't try to get her up. He didn't try to make sure she was okay. He didn't have no remorse or nothing, and I don't either. I don't think that he should have any time. He should be in jail forever, for life. And this is my beautiful, kind-hearted mother that he just took a beautiful spirit away. She can't even finish her life.
Thank you.